All right, we're going to start the meeting. We're going to call the Justice and Public Safety Committee to order. Commissioners, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Sagar will lead us. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we move to item number 3, everybody should have received an email that former Commissioner Patrick J. Johnson passed away on February 2nd. He served as the county commissioner for 26 years, and I think it would be appropriate at this time if we observed a moment of silence in his memory. Thank you, Commissioners. Item number 3, is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Are we doing by, moved by Leonetti, support by Romano. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor, please vote. The agenda is adopted 13-0. Item number 4 is approval of the minutes from January 10th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Commissioner Brown, supported by Duge. Any discussion on the minutes? Please vote. Go through, Mr. Keyes? The minutes are approved 13-0. Item number 5 is public participation. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the Justice and Public Safety Committee? Seeing none, we'll close public participation and move to item number 6, the department recommendations. 6A is the contract amendment and budget amendment, Harrison Township Law Enforcement Services. Captain Dave Daniels.
Good afternoon. Captain Dave Daniels, Macomb County Sheriff's Office. I'm here at the request of the Harrison Township Board. They did contact the Sheriff's Office, request an increase in patrol services to the Township. Township expressed a need specifically for some traffic issues they've been experiencing. The Sheriff's agreed to enter into a contract with Harrison Township. As you know, the contract will need to be amended. The current contract the contract expires on December 31st of 2018 of this year, as all of our current contracts will expire in December of this year. So all of our contracted patrol areas, we will be reviewing our contracts rather shortly. I was talking with finance with Mr. Smeagol, working on our numbers going forward to approach all of our contracted areas to review our contracts and renew those. This current contract amendment has been reviewed and approved by the township and by the finance department. The numbers that were used off of the contract amendment were based off the 2018 contract that we have currently that exists with the township right now. The township, again, has expressed an interest moving forward in 2019 to also increasing their patrol level services to an additional 4 deputies. However, moving forward, we'll address that at that time.
Thank you, Captain. The first on the list is Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Captain, thank you, sir. A couple of quick questions.
Yes,
so
sir.
I'm clear. Are we, I'm looking at this, and one portion it says it's a budget amendment, and then I look forward and I see the contract that's not signed and issued. So which are we voting on?
Well, I'm hoping to accomplish both of those today. That there's also the contract amendment will be approved at the same time. We have to amend the budget to accept the finances that Harrison Township is going to be providing for contract services.
Madam Chair, I'm just at a loss because usually then the executive, all contracts get signed by them, they come and get approved by the board, and then we make a budget amendment. And this one doesn't look, the one I'm seeing doesn't look like it's signed. Is there one that's already signed, or that's?
There was an existing contract that's signed, but not an amended contract.
So are we going to get a signed amended?
Yes, sir, you will. Once the contracts, once the amendment's been approved by the board, I'll send that amended copy to the Harrison Township Board. They'll sign off on it, and I'll bring it back to the county exec's office for the signature as well. and for I believe JPS will sign it.
And then that contract will come back to us once it's amended, correct? Okay, all right, I just want to make sure I understood. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Kleinfeld?
Thank you, Chair. Steve, off of the top of your head, do you remember the cost of a sheriff with the total cost with the benefits package included? The average. I wanted to say average. I don't want to say, because they're all going to be different.
No, it's not. They're all the same.
It won't be in this, the average, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know the average.
Okay, so, all right, I was just curious because I was wondering, is this also include the cost of the vehicle? Because looking at this, it seems low to be able to include both of those
Now, we
things.
typically include the cost of a vehicle as part of the whole contract.
Okay.
And overhead and salaries and benefits.
Okay, just for my curiosity, and I don't need it before the, I don't need it before this vote, and I don't need it before the vote in finance, because could you get me what the average cost is of a package for a sheriff's office?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Captain. Did I understand, so there's going to be 11 deputies now with this, and did I understand that the township's looking for 4 more, probably by the end of the year, looking into next year? Is that my understanding?
We've had discussions with the township about possibly increasing their patrol complement to additional 4 deputies beginning in 2019.
Okay, so they would have a total of 15 then,
That's
deputies?
correct.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
I got you. And 11 for this year.
Yes.
There was a talk, I was talking to somebody at the township, there was talk about this new deputy being a part-time deputy. That's not the case, right? This is a full-time patrol deputy that's going to be on duty, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I had a constituent say, well, I thought it was only going to be a part-time deputy. I never heard of a part-time deputy, so, all righty. Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other speakers? Any other questions? Is there a motion? So moved. Motion by Carabelli, support by Sauger. Please vote on your iPad. Item passes 13-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. 6B, the FBI Gang and Violent Crimes Task Force Forfeiture Account. Captain David Kennedy.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here to talk to you today about the FBI Safe Streets Macomb Task Force. We are seeking to assume fiduciary responsibility for their forfeiture account. Little background, this task force started in 2015. A number of agencies were involved, one of those being Warren PD. As of December of this past year, Warren pulled their staff member from the task force, and as such, they did not want to carry on being the fiduciary for the account. I spoke with the agent in charge of the Mount Clemens office, and he requested that we take over. And so I prepared this paperwork with hopes that we can become the fiduciary for the account.
It's my understanding that this does not need board approval?
I'm not sure.
I don't believe it does. I'm not exactly sure how it made its way onto the agenda. I don't believe it does. So we're already a member of the task force. All we're doing is taking over the accounting function for the forfeiture money. So we'll take the money in, and then once it's adjudicated, then we disperse it out to all the members of the task force. So we're already doing that. Whether you want to consider it maybe an interlocal agreement, I mean, I guess there's up for consideration. I wouldn't consider it such. All we're doing is taking over the accounting function.
Are there financial consequences with us taking it over?
Not really. There's not much going on here. We already do this for the Comet organization. We've done that for a number of years for them. So typically what happens with Comet, I would expect the same thing here. If there are check requests that need to be processed so funds can be dispersed, then the sheriff's office would take care of that. It would come over to my office, and we would, put in check requests, and checks would go out. So there's not really a lot of additional work that I foresee.
Okay. And it's also my understanding that our packet is marked confidential because of this agreement. So just point out to commissioners that the written agreement is confidential. Are there any questions from commissioners on this? You're not showing up. Commissioner Leonetti? Okay. Commissioner Drollet?
I'm confused. There we go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just the dollar amount that's noticed in our packet,
Yes.
is that Warren's contribution, so to speak, or Warren's part, or is it the whole fund?
That was the whole fund.
Okay,
We're not, yeah, that's the whole fund.
okay. And I guess just following up on a comment by the chair, why is it confidential?
I think it's because there's FBI letters attached to it, to be quite honest with you.
Okay. FBI memos? Confidential
Well, I
FBI
don't wanna
memos?
touch it. Yeah. I want nothing to do with that.
Point of
Recognize the chair
information.
for a point.
Leon,
I'm sorry.
Leon,
Yeah.
on a point of information.
Yeah.
Everything that we've checked on so far says this was really just a courtesy to let us know here. So since this is
Let's just
generally
make a motion to receive and file.
confidential, it'll be a motion, at the end, probably a motion to even acknowledge, but receive and file or acknowledge. So I would just say that based on that, the information that we got from him is more courtesy as opposed to having 1,000 questions on a document that is technically confidential because the FBI did not say that we could put that out. So
Okay,
I'd appreciate if we could move on in that capacity.
I'm ready to roll.
And if I may, I just believe the fact that they're talking about specific investigative techniques and that type of thing, their supervision, basically gives the layout of their task force. So, ergo, it needs to be confidential because we don't want it falling into the wrong hands. So. Well, that's a good question.
Commissioner Kleinfeld?
Thank you, and this isn't with regard to the contract, it just sort of following up on what Chair Toko had said. I'm surprised there isn't some sort of administrative fee, even if it's nominal, if it proves to be something that seems to take up time, in the future. Can you negotiate that sort of thing, or is it just that they dictate it?
I would think not. I don't really know.
Okay. I'm thinking probably not too. I just, 99% of these things, when somebody's an administrator, there's some sort of fee. Thank you.
Commissioner Carabelli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question's for Steve.
Okay.
I get this, I understand it. I would ask, though, for you to think about probably doing an audit before you receive and make sure that where it's supposed to be, where it was, and when you receive it, so that we're all straight. Just in my head, the wheel kind of stopped a little bit. Why don't they want to administer it? Not saying that anything funny is going on. I just would double check to make sure that you're good to go on
I
that.
believe they pulled out of the task force, didn't they?
They did. They did.
So they're not a member of the task force anymore, so there's no one in the task force from
Okay.
Warren to,
And I know what those funds are used for, and I
know.
understand why it's confidential. So with that said, how do you know that that's the number that's supposed to be cut? I'm just, I would double check and triple check to make sure that's what it is
Okay.
before you sign
Yep,
up. And at
we
the
can
end
do
of the
that.
day, hey, what happened to that other 800 grand? I'm just, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, is there a motion to receive and file? Moved by Carabelli, supported by Sauger. Please vote. Thank you, Captain.
Thank you, everyone.
Six C, the annual Region 2 Homeland Security Board Grant Report. Vicki Wolber. Homeland.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Before you have our annual report with a list of the projects that each of the 7-member jurisdictions, the annual report, I am mixed up in my head. For each of the 7-member jurisdictions for the UASI region, for which we receive UASI and Homeland Security funding. The board has requested in the past that you like to see a report, just so you get a list of an idea of the list of projects that each jurisdiction undertakes. Right now, we have 2 grants that are current and expenditures are flowing through, which are the 2015 and the 2016 grants. So that is the list of projects that you have. And then later on, we'll be approving the 2017 interlocal agreement, and those expenditures will then be starting once that grant is approved. Any questions?
I don't have any speakers on the list. Is there a motion, Commissioner Carabelli? Is there support? By Commissioner Lucido. All those in favor of receiving and filing the report? Item passes. Thank you. 6D, the interlocal funding agreement for the 2017 Homeland Security Grant Program. Vicki?
Once again, back in August of 2017, through the UASI board process, the county was approved as the fiduciary for the regional grant funds. We received our grant agreement from the state of Michigan back in October. That was processed through the UASI board and then also through our contract review process here at the county. And now one of the last steps with that is we have to produce interlocal agreements so that now we can make the reimbursements to the local jurisdictions or our 6 partners. So what you have in front of you is basically the standard template that we've used for probably the past 7 years now, with the appropriate information filled in there. Interlocal agreements are only with the 6 partners. We don't have an interlocal agreement with ourselves, so because we get our funding direct from the state when the reimbursements come in. So that's why maybe if you're trying to add numbers up, the amounts in the interlocal agreement don't add up to the full grant amount, because obviously our amount is not included in the interlocal agreements. And I'll entertain any questions if anyone has any.
That our independent counsel has reviewed this and has proposed a resolution for future use. Vicki has also reviewed that and doesn't see any issue with that. Commissioner Brown.
What is our amount for the administration?
Our amount that we receive between the 2 programs, the SHSP and UASI funding, is just under $500,000. And then for M&A purposes, for covering the grant and all the administrative functions, is $207,000. And that pays for our entire grant staff that handles the management and administration. Overall, it's 5% of the entire grant award.
And those, do we have those 17 projects identified?
Yeah, we're in the process of doing that now, yes.
Okay, so when will we receive a list of the project that 500,000 is being applied to?
Generally, I would do it on an annual basis, so a year from now. We're still spending money on the 2015 and 2016 grants.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
You're
Question
welcome.
for you. Why is Livingston County not part of this co-op that you have?
It's based on information and the designated population areas through the federal government, and they do not fall into our Census Bureau area that they use.
Okay. No, because I'd just like to point out to the rest of the board members that this is the SIMCOG map minus Livingston, that they're doling out money, and they're saying this is how you're gonna spend it. So keep that in mind when they come up with all these new taxes and all these things that they wanna do for Oakland, Macomb, and Wayne only, yet on all this, Washtenaw and everybody else is included. But yet not when it comes for paying for anything else additional. This is money all coming in, like money comes into SEMCOG, and it gets divvied out equally. Yet, they're gonna come and ask for tax increases for all these different things, RTA and everything else. And how come all these other communities aren't involved with it too? Just chew on that and think on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other speakers? Is there a motion to forward this to the Finance Committee? Moved by Leonetti, supported by Kraft. Please vote. Unanimously passes. Thank you, Vicki.
Great, thank you all.
Item number 6E is to amend the Justice and Public Safety Committee schedule to move our April 18th meeting at 3 o'clock to April 19th to be a joint meeting with Government Operations. The reason that I'm requesting this is because I serve on the Community Corrections Advisory Board as a result of being chairing this committee or being a commissioner. The schedule was released, and every single meeting that they have this year falls on a meeting that we have except for one. So I would like to be able to attend some of the meetings. This moves it over to combine a meeting. Moved by Duje, supported by Drollet. Please vote. Commissioner Brown, did you have a question?
I appreciate you asking us to have a vote on this.
Thank
Very
you.
nice. So considerate of you.
Looks like it unanimously passes. Thank you, Commissioners. Item number 7 is a presentation from Tanya Grillo, which is on the Indigent Defense Commission Macomb County update.
Good afternoon. Tanya Grillo. I'm from the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission. I am the regional manager for Macomb, Oakland, Lapeer, and St. Clair counties. And I know some of you because you practiced law with me for a while. So I'm just going to go over some basic updates so that way you can bring everybody up to speed. At this point, there's nothing that the commission needs to vote on, or the commissioners rather, for Macomb County. The executive's office has been working with the MIDC, submitting a plan, reviewing some information and whatnot. But just in way of background, I was here several months ago talking a little bit about the 4 standards that were to be discussed and drafting compliance plans. So the 4 standards are Standard 1, which is education and training for defense attorneys. Standard 2 is initial interviews. Standard 3 is experts and investigators, and Standard 4 is counsel at first appearance and other critical stages. Those standards were adopted by Lara on May 22nd of 2017. All compliance plans for the 133 units across the state, encompassing all the counties and municipalities and third-class district courts, were due November 20th. We received 132 of those plans. There were 2 entities that failed to submit plans, and we're working with those to get those in. 15 were approved in full. 119 must be resubmitted by February 20th, so that's my next deadline. So I'm going to be brief in this review because I've got lots of work to do with those entities. There were 3 categories that plans fell in. They were either approved in its entirety, which meant the cost analysis as well as the compliance plan, how those funding units were going to guarantee that those 4 standards were implemented. The other category was they disapproved the compliance plan as well as the cost analysis. And then the majority of plans were the plans were approved, the cost analysis was not. So that's where we're working on. Macomb County's plan was disapproved on both the compliance plan as well as the cost analysis. There were some key concerns that the commission brought up, one of which was ancillary spending. There's been some discussion by the sheriff's office about officers and things like that. So some of those things, if there was something that the sheriff's office wanted, Macomb County Jail wanted, or the court needed, we needed to see a direct tie to indigent defense. And if we couldn't find that within that narrative and that plan, and or based upon my experience working in Macomb County for 6 years, if we couldn't figure out what they asked for, we weren't approving that. We have to be fiscally responsible with those monies as well. So we're working on that. We're also discussing more of the narrative. There needed to be more explanation for Standards 2, which again is initial interviews for all indigent defense and their clients, as well as Standard 4, counsel at first appearance, and those critical stages. Macomb County also has 2 second-class district courts, the 42. So Romeo and Chesterfield, New Baltimore fall into that category, so we need to take a look at that. And the nice thing is I've been working diligently with John Neisel, Barb Caskey, she's the liaison for the executive's office on this, as well as Susan Salvo, who's here as well. We've been talking a lot about the things that needed to be changed within that plan. So I'm happy to report that everyone is doing exactly what they need to do. We anticipate having a plan ready to be submitted by February 16th, which is 4 days ahead of the deadline. So we like to be in there early. We've gone back and forth on a couple of things. We've met 2 other times since the commission voted on their plan at the beginning of January. And they knew going into that vote what to anticipate about what was going to be rejected and why. So we're working on that. And the extent of what needs to happen as far as the statute's concerned, there's nothing that necessarily needs to be voted on your end. It's not a reimbursement grant. This is a first funded grant. Nothing changes in Macomb County or any of the other entities across the state of Michigan unless money comes in. Today, the governor's office proposed their budget. We are proud that we're in it. So the 18-19 fiscal years where we're looking for funding. So monies would be coming in for the October 1st timeframe. The way the statute is written is if everything is pushed through, legislation does what it needs to do, and they give us our money with the state appropriations, we will be looking at systematic change over a course of a 6-month period. So once funding comes into Macomb County, when the contracts need to be signed and whatnot, then we will talk about the move and change. So they have 6 months to make those changes. So in Macomb County, for instance, if there needs to be any type of construction in the 42s, for instance, 42-1 in New Baltimore, or sorry, in Romeo, if anyone's ever practiced out there or gone to that building, there used to be a substation for the sheriff's department. I didn't even know about that substation because it hasn't been used forever. And so knocking down a simple wall and opening a door allows for confidential space for attorneys and their clients who are in custody for the very first time. So that will take a while to accomplish. They'll have to do an RFP or however they do for bidding for that construction, or perhaps their own facilities team can do that. But nothing happens until money comes in first. So the county will not incur any additional costs. The discussion about the police officers and sheriff's department, the personnel. In Macomb County Circuit Court, which is right next door, you would know if you practiced, where inmates are kept, where our in-custody clients are kept, is behind chambers. In order to facilitate a confidential conversation between attorneys and their clients, which has never occurred because you can't, you're in front of a cell and you're talking to your client with 5 other inmates in there. You can't really talk to someone who's accused of anything really with confidentiality. And so what has happened traditionally is you ask the deputy who's in the courtroom to help you move a client into an adjacent room, which happens to be the jury room. So whoever built that building back in the day wasn't thinking about confidentiality at all, or let alone the safety of judges and or juror members. So what happens now is we ask, and then they bring them into a room and they sit with us because they can't leave us alone. There's too many things that could be turned into weapons. And so now with the proposal that Susan has been part of in the discussion is the idea of having an extra officer who is situated in the building, 2 of them actually, that will help facilitate the move from that lockup area to a confidential room down the hallway, which already exists, and they would never be leaving our sides. But more importantly, this protection of the community, as well as the judges and other attorneys and staff, would be protected. And the door would shut and we'd be allowed to have confidential conversations. That doesn't cost money for construction, it just costs manpower. And having manpower. So that's part of the ancillary spending that I feel, is justified. So we're talking about that. We've changed the strategy. There was concern about what would be needed at the other 42s. It doesn't need to happen because New Baltimore is a newer building, which has the confidential space. So we're working those little details out. But those are the first 4 standards. 4 more have been suggested and are out for comment. The comment period was supposed to close on February 1. The commissioners are meeting on February 20th. I anticipate them reopening that because for the longest time, for the last 60 days or 90 days really, everyone's been focused on the first 4, and we haven't had a lot of comments on the next set. The next set include independence from the judiciary. So now we're proposing that judges no longer are the ones that are making any appointments to the list because it's too tied. A lot of defense attorneys around the state are fearful of doing work on the best for their clients because they don't want to be removed from lists. If you ask for too much or you fight too hard, in some places, you don't get any clients. The next is caseloads. So in places where there's public defender offices, the caseloads are huge. There are not enough defenders out there for those offices. The percentage of the cases, you might be familiar with how Wayne County's works. It's a 25% slot. Even with 25% of the cases, those public defenders are overworked and underpaid. To make that ratio happen, standard 7 is the qualifications. Just because you're on a list doesn't mean you get to stay on a list. You might be taking cases that you don't need to be taking in the first place. And I know a current situation in Oscoda County that happened. A CSC won multiple counts. A public defender who had that case or assigned counsel is less than 3 years out of law school, has no business taking a life offense case, and it was appointed to him. So now they're having to go back to the drawing board and appoint another first chair to that case. But those are the types of problems that exist. And standard 8 is compensation. That's the one that defense attorneys want to talk about the most because it affects how much money they get paid. If you know anyone who takes public defense work, that you would know that usually for a retained case, something similar you might be able to charge $5,000 for, you might get $725 from the county to pick that case. So those types of things are addressed, but no one that does public defense work would ever say that they came into that business to get rich. They're doing the right thing every single day. They just should be compensated for the things that they're putting out, whether or not it's the research time, whether or not it's the investigators that they have to employ, or just their own resources. So there's some suggested numbers that are part of those standards. We encourage people to look at those standards, and as part of this committee, I would hope that each one of you would want to look at that standard and see what's happening in your own county and across the state of Michigan. So we encourage you to look at that. You can check out everything for the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission on our website. We are all about transparency, so www.michiganidc.gov is where you'll find everything from our standards to our commissioners, our background. Everything that we've ever published is available for you, all of our weight papers on every one of our, on our first 4 standards, and we're working on the next set once those are approved to be released. So any questions or concerns that you might have?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, once the funding is approved to start putting it together, and I'm not sure exactly the timeline, I'm assuming we would be doing a budget amendment at that time because there would have to be a budget amendment to put those revenues into the county budget?
That's a good question. The way the grant will work, the application and or the compliance plan in itself is the grant application. So once that has been approved by our commission and funded by the appropriations, what will happen is there'll be a contract that will be signed by the county with that. And there's going to have to be a separate account. It cannot go into general funds. It will have to be separate because we'll have to be auditing that to ensure that those funds are going straight to the IDC.
Do you know that even if it's a separate account, we do have a lot of accounts that aren't part of the general fund? Is that part of the budget we would be approving on a yearly basis?
I'm not 100% familiar with your policies and or how your procedures work for the county. I guess that would be something that you would want to discuss with the executive's office, as El Lorenzo is the individual who's been working with Barb Caskey. She's been working directly with her.
Okay, and if it does go into our budget, so we have to do a budget amendment and it's a separate item, I'm assuming that we would be restricted to not change that in any way, shape, or form.
Correct.
Because it's a set, okay. And then with respect to the extra police officer, are you indicating that that would be something that should be funded by the state?
There are 4 officers, let me back up. In the initial plan that was submitted on November 20th, there was a request for 10 additional sheriff's officers to do various things. I'm very familiar with the fact that the jail is looking for a lot of renovations and or things that go along with it. They were trying to tie certain things.
Okay, so I'm not concerned about that.
I know.
So set that aside.
I understand what your question is, but in order for background, so there was 10 requested. There are 4 requested now in this plan that's going to be resubmitted by the 20th of this month. Those 4 I support. I'm not the commission. I can't vote on it.
Okay.
I understand the logic. So part of my explanation to the commission would be I do need these officers in order to facilitate the transport of Indigent Defense Counsel to their client in order to have confidential conversations.
And then when you get to the point of the confidential conversation, you said 2 things. You said you would never be alone, but then you also said you would be able to speak with confidentiality with the client. So is the officer are they outside of the room or are they inside of the room?
They're outside of the room.
Okay, that helps me. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Tanya.
Great to
I
see
know
you,
that
too.
your passion, I can see it now in your new role. So I know you are an excellent defense attorney, and I can see you're doing a lot of good stuff. And and I've been in the trenches with you too, so a lot of the stuff you're talking about, I'm very familiar with. One thing now is I'm a commissioner, and so I have to wear a commissioner hat. So a lot of what you're saying, I completely understand. Representing defendants, both retained as well as indigent counsel defense. The biggest concern I have wearing my commissioner hat is, and I'm glad you told me, I'm glad you said that the governor's budget has this program in it. The biggest concern I have is we do everything, we go into compliance as a county, we follow everything the way we should do it, and then the state says we're not going to give you any more money. And that is a fear I have as a commissioner because we're complaining about roads. I mean, our biggest thing right now is roads. We don't have the revenue sharing to take care of roads, and we've got citizens calling us all the time, what's going on with roads? And all I can tell them is, we're not getting the money from Lansing, and so we're trying to figure out what we can do with limited resources. What's your take on this? I mean, do you think that we're going to set this all up and in, let's say, 2024's budget, some governor's going to say, I'm just going to cut this out, and now we're stuck with having to have the extra deputy there for the private sessions with an indigent defendant? Are we going to be stuck with all the different things we did? What's your take on that?
Well, that's a good question. The way the statute is written is it's no money, no due.
Okay.
So what would happen in a 2024 scenario, let's say for 6 years, Macomb County and every single county in the state of Michigan has changed their entire system. Macomb County's program right now is a assigned counsel system. We don't have a public defender office here. And so the plan has been to continue with the assigned counsel system as of right now. If things shift and change with Standard 5 and, maybe there's a need to have a public defender office, albeit a small one, because you cannot have a full let me make sure that this is absolutely clear. You can never have a 100% public defender office anywhere because you have too much conflict counsel. You have conflicts because you have defense attorneys who cannot represent multiple people in the same scenario. So let's say there's 10 co-defendants. Only one of those co-defendants can be represented by a public defender office. Everything else has to be assigned counsel and conflict counsel. So in scenarios like there are entities in areas of Michigan that are looking to make public defender offices. Great question, because what happens if the money's gone? Then they go back to what they did before. Unless the county feels that they're saving money, which could possibly come into fruition, because there are certain things that are going to be cost saving. There's going to be lots of startup costs for certain things that will be absorbed this funding round, and then once that takes place, like the construction, they'll never have to repay that construction cost and things like that. Some places need a lot more work than others. Macomb County has a lot of great things already established here. Some places are a little bit more troubled than others. So, but if there's no money, then systems go back to what they were doing. Although I find it hard to believe that they'd want to.
Okay, well that's good, and that's right in the statute. No money, then no requirement for compliance.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. Thank you for your good work.
Thanks.
All right, appreciate it. Good
that.
seeing you. Take care. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. How was it you were tasked to do this?
I was a practicing defense attorney in the state of Michigan for about 5 years before I applied for the commission. I'm staff to the commission. So I was working, my office was here in Macomb County. Predominantly, I grew up in St. Clair Shores. I always wanted to do public defense work. I was sad that we didn't have our own public defender office, so now I'm out there creating ones around the state.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money, though. It's
I
a
do.
wish list of expensive items you want to do. I respect the fact that, some of it needs to be done, but it's all a matter of priorities. But
it is, but it's also, with all due respect, it's part of the Constitution. It's the Sixth Amendment. So, basically why we're here is in 2008, there was a study called Race to the Bottom by the Sixth Amendment Center and the ACLU. We had lots of lawsuits happening in Michigan as a result of ineffective assistance of counsel. In fact, they continue to roll out opinion after opinion saying that these defense attorneys who are not effectively, who are not compensated fairly, who have systems that don't fund experts and investigators, we have a constitutional duty to do our due diligence for our cases, and they're not happening. And that's happening across the country, not just Michigan, but we're ranked 44th per capita spending. When you have a budget of $9 million for, prosecutor's office, and you have something far less for defense, that's where a priority is. I'm all about equal justice. My family was a victim myself. I should be prosecutor. But I'm not. I'm here helping a system because it's very broken. And so I agree that it's very costly, but at the end of the day, I sleep good at night knowing that I'm doing the best I can to make sure that everyone's even in going in that courtroom.
Okay, well, that'll never happen, It'll never be even.
Well, I'm hoping to at least bring up the bar, because right now it's like this.
Okay.
That's not the justice hands.
Well, I appreciate your passion. Thank you very much, and we'll do what we can with the money they're going to give us. Thank you.
Point of information, she's pretty feisty. I've seen her in action, Don, so she's going to do everything she can to try to make it even.
They don't want me in that governor's office.
Hey, I want her on my team. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Speakers on the list. Are there any others? Is there a motion to receive and file? Moved by Leonetti, supported by Lucido. Please vote. Thank you again for that presentation, Tanya.
Absolutely. If anyone has any questions or concerns, you can always reach me at tgrillo@michiganidc.gov, and I'll stay around until the end if you have any questions.
Thank you. Item number 8, new business. Is there any new business for this committee? Seeing none, is there any members of the public who wish to address the committee? Commissioner Dujay, is there a motion to adjourn? Is there support? Support by Romano. Please vote.